Our studio guest today is going to talk to us about how, well, we so many of us have sedentary lifestyles. Look at me, for instance. I'm sitting here behind a microphone, and I don't know that I really am in the best of shape pushing buttons on a soundboard or answering the telephones. And then usually when I walk out of here, I spend a couple of hours sitting at a desk. Dr. Jonathan Tripp is in studio, Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine this morning. It's 8:37, and he's talking with us today about, and this is not difficult. This is just some exercise tips that will help you perhaps prolong your life, and you'll feel better too as well.
So,
First of all, welcome back.
thank you. I'm hoping most of the listeners want to live longer. So,
Yes.
if you really don't want to, then just go ahead, turn off, walk away for a half hour, and then we'll let you come back to the regular radio.
The reason I want to is because there's things that I still want to
Uh,
accomplish in
You
life.
have a bucket list.
Right. And there's
Awesome.
so many things that I want to accomplish. I realize it's going to take at least another 20 years, if not longer. So you've been talking with me anyway for a long time about how just a little bit of exercise, getting up and moving around can make somewhat of a difference.
Yeah, in fact, often I think we provide a lot of hope in our office because if somebody just feels like, I can't get to the gym 4 times a week or 5 times a week and I can't do this and my job requires me to be sedentary and, I have all these things going on with my family and I can't get around to exercise. My response usually is, well, if you're doing nothing, let's do something because a little bit does go a long way. And that's today is really going to emphasize that because we're talking about a headline that came out really about 2 years ago that sitting is the next smoking. And reality is, as this has been researched more and more, it has, instead of being, refuted, it's actually been supported to say, this is a bigger deal than we thought it was. For decades, we've had majority of people have office jobs where you're sitting in a chair, working at a desk, working a telephone, and now, it's all heavily computer related. And so the thought of being able to get up and walk around feels like I'm going to be less productive. I'll be perceived as, slacking. And so I got to stay right there at my desk, even if I'm, falling asleep at the computer. So that is kind of the mentality. But let me go right to the Centers for Disease Control. They've produced, it's actually a poster, but the poster starts out by saying the number one cause of it says chronic diseases are now the number one threat to public health. So public health also translates to death. Um, when they talk about public health, they're looking at things that relate to the productivity, loss of productivity, increased costs of health for the population that we have. And we have a more aging population. So that has to do with, we talk about baby boomers, and so cycles of how many people are born in which decades. But the reality is that the chronic healthcare costs, 75% of them relate to chronic diseases. So what's a chronic disease? Hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, and then we talk specifically about obesity and its impact. But it's really interesting because you would think smoking would be the number one contributor to heart disease and cancers and this and that. And it is one that increases the risk of all those. But according to the CDC now, they say prolonged sitting is the number one contributor to chronic diseases. I talk about 85% of the U.S. workforce is paid to sit at a desk all day, and 1 hour of sitting is as unhealthy as smoking 2 cigarettes. Well, that's going to make a lot of cigarette smokers happy, because if they can walk and smoke, doesn't that equal? Well, not quite, but the reality is sitting is a little more threatening than we thought it was. It's not just about getting a larger behind.
And we only have about a quarter of the population, even if it's that any longer, that smokes cigarettes. So that, while that's still obviously a threat for those people, the numbers are so greatly diminished, I would think that we're seeing those other factors now becoming more important.
Well, and I don't think they were less important. I just don't think they were recognized. My dad would often refer to the secretary spread. And what's interesting, one of these studies says that it's not just because you're sitting and you're maintaining calories, that there actually is true pressure that stimulates fat cells to produce more fat cells. So there is kind of a correlation. There is a direct correlation between your body shape and how long you sit. So that was a phrase I was used to hearing for years growing up as a kid. Um, so let me tell you about kind of what are the things that do if you get up and move. And we're going to talk about how much to move. Well, they're talking, CDC says get up and move every hour. And if you read into their details of their studies, they talk about 250 steps. So that's actually several minutes of walking. It's not, from here to the next cubicle. It's actually get up and you move around. But if you can do that every hour, you get about a 25 to 30% reduction in all of these.
Well, we'll hold that thought. We'll take a short break. I've got a
We'll,
question to
we'll,
follow up
we'll
with
leave
that.
you in suspense.
Yes, we'll.
Stay tuned.
We've got,
Same bat time, same bat channel. That's
yeah,
right.
he actually lives close by, right? So he's in
Okay.
good shape for his age.
Awesome.
20 minutes away from 9 o'clock. It's 38. Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us. Bill Colley, too. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us for another 20 minutes. Bill Colley, too, answering the telephones and running the soundboard. But Dr. Tripp is here to talk to you about improving your health and some benefits from just getting up and doing a little walking. You referenced 250 steps once an hour. Now, I used to work in a many different work environments. Generally, you'd get a lunch hour, but that was generally half an hour, and you might get two 15-minute breaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The issue is how many employers are willing to let people get up and take those 250 steps every hour.
Exactly. This is a hurdle, and there are quite a few more since this has been out for a couple of years. Uh, Probably the most prominent physician researcher on this is a guy named by the last name of Levine out of Mayo Clinic, and he has been instrumental in going to major corporations and demonstrating how not only is this better for their employees' health and the employer as an insurer will save lots of money over the short term and the long term, but that by getting up, moving around, that you're stimulating your brain and you get the blood flow going. Your body is ready to go instead of ready to fall asleep. And so your productivity in those other 55 minutes is a lot better than it would have been had you stayed at your seat. And so once that can be shown, then employers become much more interested in the idea of, you know what, especially if you have to be in an area where you have to supervise, get up and supervise. If I think of our local manufacturers and they have people that are doing the same thing physically over and over, and so they probably are not sedentary. But for those that are sitting at the desk, uh, getting up, moving around, or one of the key things that they're uh, recommending that we change to is a standing desk. They even go as far as having these little really slow treadmills that you're walking about a mile and a half an hour, never break a sweat, but and you can remain steady enough to do your computer work. Those are pretty expensive, but simply just having a desk that's higher that requires you to stand or sit on a bar stool when you do sit, that kind of level of chair, that is really improving not only how frequently you're on your feet, willing to step, willing to move around, but it's many of the articles I read talk about how people stop complaining about back pain. So it's more than just saying, hey, let's live longer, let's live healthier. Back pain is kind of where the rubber meets the road. A lot of people just struggle with chronic back pain, and sometimes they're doing okay, and other times they're terrible. And they will almost always tell you that laying or standing is much better than sitting, and that's because sitting puts 4 times the amount of pressure on your lumbar spine, where most back pain is. So,
And the number of Americans who experience that, I guess, has just been skyrocketing.
with the back pain, oh, the more we're sedentary, the more likely you are to be injured, and you're literally putting quadruple the pressure on that low back all the time you sit. And people think, well, sitting is less motion, less threatening to my body, and the answer is it sets you up for more trouble. Actually, not just with the back, but all kinds of stuff. So let's go back to what are these benefits of getting up and moving around. And let me address one thing: the 5 minutes every hour would be ideal. Well, what if you can't do that? Because that was your real question. If you have the half-hour lunch, if you can use most of that on a brisk walk, you will replace, you'll improve the danger that comes with the the sitting for prolonged periods. One of the studies recently, sports medicine studies, showed that if somebody can do moderate intensity exercise, which is brisk walking, riding a bike kind of casually, if you can do that an hour a day, you pretty well offset 8 hours of being sedentary. That's awesome. But not everybody says, well, I can fit in a solid hour. But if you can do a half hour at lunch, 10 minutes at your break, or decide to get up and walk the long way to deliver, you know, information you need to hand off to somebody, those all add up. And so, some suggestions with how to do that is walk to talk to somebody instead of emailing somebody that's across the office. Get up and go talk to them instead of phone calling. Get up and go talk to them because those little bit of getting up and going, they add up. They all count. Um, Taking the stairs, you've probably heard that for years.
Hmm.
If you have an elevator, try to avoid it. Try to take the stairs. Try to take the long way around if you're needing to do something in the office. My wife, in particular, we have what is kind of like the bullpen of where the nurses and the practitioners are. And so she'll come out of her office and need to go to the front desk and either cut through that bullpen and which usually knocks several of us down because we're all in there kind of tight. It's, she's not very good at knocking us down actually, but she's decided she'll go around because there's a long way, almost a circle in our office that she can take the long way around and avoid the other people but get more steps in. So that's one of the things you can just strategize and say, well, I typically get up and do this. How can I do it with a few more steps?
I wanted lunch one day earlier this week, and I was going out for lunch, so I walked. It took me about I think 18 minutes. I timed it to get there, ate
Uh-huh.
my lunch, and then got up and spent probably about 45 minutes more walking after that before I went home. So if I had actually decided to drive to get my lunch, wouldn't have done any good, right?
Correct. I mean, the walking home would have still been good, but you would have had to take the car,
Yeah.
so you couldn't walk home. So let me talk about the real benefits. I keep saying there's all these good benefits. Well, walking, and I'm going to focus on the every hour because that's the ideal. Reduces cancers, increases the length of your life, reduces your risk for diabetes, your risk for hypertension, your risk for heart attacks and strokes, and the one that I emphasized earlier is back pain is reduced by standing, and just really these are things you are easy take home messages. Um, some ideas to how to get up is set an alarm to to get up out of your desk. If you can use a tool that helps see how many steps you do, like a Fitbit, it's even more important in some of these studies to show when you don't. So I know specifically with the Fitbit type device that you can track every hour if you've been active or not, and it'll show you hour by hour, day by day, and you can start to really see patterns. If Sunday afternoon is when you take your nap, you're going to see that you're down. You're not doing anything.
I heard a doctor tell me one time he wanted me to walk between 12 and 15,000 steps per day. Now, that's
That,
about 90 minutes, right,
that
before you're all said and done.
it probably is, and I know that this same Dr. Levine gives a baseline of about 10,000 is a good baseline to say. If you're doing that, you're at least doing you're gaining most of the benefit out of doing this. And so it's not just the number of steps, although that does help. That's an easy way to track it, but it is the frequency really improves things a lot. So let me go back to this outlined by the CDC and just um, kind of tell you those benefits. That reduction, about 25% reduction in the risk for breast cancer. I mean, who would think that just getting up and moving around helps reduce breast cancer? About that same 25% for risk of colon cancer, for stroke, 30% reduction for the threat of type 2 diabetes, and 50% reduction for threat of having high blood pressure. So those are big deals. And here's a great one for employers to pay attention to. If you take active versus sedentary employees, you take 1,000 employees for those same five diseases we're talking about, the stroke, colon cancer, breast cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure. Um, the active group, the employer will spend, let's see, over, I'm looking for the time frame, but anyway, the active group will spend $202,000. The inactive group will be $312,000. So a full 50% increase for sedentary versus unsedentary, and that's money going to be spent by the employer.
We have a caller joining us, and it's 8:52. Caller, you're on Top Story with Dr. Jonathan Tripp. Well, I think the caller's moved over to the other line. It rolled over. Caller, you're on the air. Go ahead. You're on KLIX.
Yes, I just a little bit off subject, but I'm looking for a painkiller to get rid of the opioid painkillers. I've seen some advertised on television. I was wondering how good they work. I need something stronger than over-the-counter or prescription ibuprofen, but I'd like to get away from that.
Good question. I don't know what's being advertised on TV. If you're talking about Lyrica, that is one that um, they're really expensive. They do work, and in my personal opinion, they still have a pretty high addictive potential. So
Oh,
if that's the one you're talking about,
it is.
I would have you talk to chronic pain management. We have two sources in town. Um, there's Dr. DeLay and Dr. McIntyre, and they would be excellent resources to talk about what's a better choice there for you.
Okay, thank you.
Want to thank you for the call. And people who'd like to reach your office, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, our phone number is area code 208 933 4400. That's 933 4400. And our website is trippvalleymedicine.com. And it's a new website as of about a week ago. So if you get on there and cruise through and find things that we didn't do quite right or you like really well, please let us know so that we can adjust that or add things to it, what you'd like to see. You can download new patient paperwork so you can have that filled out and save 15 or 20 minutes at the office for your first visit. And we are accepting new patients. The Facebook page is Trip Valley Medicine. So 933 4400 is our telephone number, and we're across the street from the post office on Fillmore on the north side of town.
You said something in your outline for today that really surprised me. And you wrote that better than going to the gym 3 times weekly, meaning that if you have that time to walk every 5 minutes every hour during the workday, that it beats going to the gym Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
It's probably the single biggest thing I took away from why do a little bit frequently versus the big time workout, because you really feel if you do go to the gym and you do lift weights and you do, if you're a runner and you do 5 miles, when you're done with those, you really worked out and you feel good about that workout. But if you're not able to do that, either time wise or physically, it was really interesting for me to see that if you can do this every 5 minutes walking, just slow walking, getting up, moving around, I'm sorry, every hour, do the 5 minutes. You are you are increasing your health benefits beyond if you went 3 times a week to the gym.
I know that there was a time 25 years ago when we were told get your heart rate up for 17 minutes, and then I heard it was 37 minutes, and then, but I'm now hearing that this cumulative effect of just a little bit of exercise throughout the day may outweigh that whole notion of that length of time with a heart rate.
If you only did, 20 minutes or 30 minutes of increased heart rate exercise, that would be good, but the smaller incremental would outweigh that. What I would really encourage people to do is do 20 minutes because increasing that heart rate helps with decreasing your blood sugars all day long, increases your calorie use all day long. And so there are immediate benefits with that. And there's even some endorphin production, so you actually feel better. But just if you're taking all chronic disease point of view, and you had to choose between that 20 or 30 minutes and getting up and doing short walks all day, the short walks actually still win. But I would encourage both.
And if you can't do the short walks, don't give up on the long walk.
Right. Oh yeah. No. The long walk is beautiful for all kinds of reasons, not just physical, but your mental health as well. In fact, people that will do the getting up, the moving, even if they have mental health issues like depression and anxiety, they are worse if you're sedentary than if you're active. So activity improves all kinds of chronic issues.
Got about 40 seconds left. Are you still collecting coats at the office?
We still are. I saw the box yesterday, but boy, today is the first day of the cold, so we'd love to have you bring coats. That'll go to several groups for those that can't afford them. And I want to say one other thing on all this talk about getting up and walking in employers. We would be happy if you want to talk to your employer, or if you're an employer, happy to come and discuss doing like a wellness plan or ergonomic kind of looking at how the desk situation is, how can we improve, and how can people get up so that your people are better, they're more productive, and you pay less as an employer.
Tripp Family Consulting.
Yeah, there you go. It's all
Yeah.
about health, right? Better health.
We'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Better Health, in fact, returns next Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Coming up in the next hour, top story, some surprising news coming out of neighboring Oregon, and it appears that even in a state considered very liberal, there's some pushback going on against some of the politically correct. That's on the way just after the news from Fox.